Hey everybody, welcome to episode 7 of the Ilizwi Moja Africa podcast. So my name is Lindile Mthembu, and an academic reviewer from South Africa, and allow me to introduce my co-host. Heri Rianga is a youth program specialist, author, and leadership coach at Shuja Rising Consulting, hailing from Kenya, as well as Gcinile Zinisa, who is a budding ecologist from the Kingdom of Eswatini. So thank you for tuning into our podcast. Last month, we started a new series on leadership. We started out discussing leadership in general and how leadership looks from the African perspective. So today, we're actually excited to do an episode on women and are joined by two amazing women leaders. So Victoria is a trainer and analyst in the field of enterprise, wide governance, risk, and compliance. She holds a Master's of Laws degree at the University of Witwatersrand, specializing in information and communications technology law. Her poison of choice in leadership is education. She teaches toddlers at Sunday school, tutors children in primary and high school, provides personal, professional, and academic mentorship to budding women in law, and facilitates knowledge and skills transfers to clients and consultants at EGRC. Basically, whoever you are, if you need to learn something, she wants to be there to support you through it.
Thank you so much, Slee, for the introduction. So welcome, ladies. May I introduce Olerato Matodi from Botswana. Olerato is a communication and youth innovation specialist, and she currently runs a volunteer organization called Volunteer Hub to promote leadership driven by meaningful volunteering. Olerato is a Mandela Washington Fellow, 22 alumni, and a 2019 African Youth Volunteer Corps, and she currently serves as a member of the first African Union Reference Group on Volunteerism, which is a coordinating mechanism by the African Union for key stakeholders engaged in promoting volunteerism on the African continent. Olerato is a qualified trainer on design thinking, human-centered design facilitator for volunteers and youth engagement initiatives. Matodi's work is centered around promoting meaningful youth participation, engagement, and leadership to lead a sustainable life. Welcome to the podcast, ladies. And before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Ilizwi Moja, on Facebook at Ilizwi Moja, and make sure to also check out our new TikTok page at Ilizwi Moja Africa to continue our conversations. Like our videos and subscribe to our channel. Also, feel free to comment as we continue with our discussions. We'd like to hear from your thoughts.
Greatness. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us. So let's jump right in, right? So we know that embracing women leaders has been an ongoing journey. So women have been welcomed in a lot of patriarchal spaces. However, women have also dealt with pushbacks from individuals who don't believe in the progression of women leaders. I think we can somewhat agree that women leaders have a unique way of leading their followers. Some may argue that women leaders are more transformational than male leaders. They function as role models for their subordinates. They inspire their team and spend a lot of time coaching their team. They care a lot about their personal development. So with that being said, ladies, what does female leadership mean to you?
So if I can just get started, I don't know if that's all right with you, ladies.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. For me, female leadership, and this is just from my experience, I in no way claim to be, an expert on the differences between the genders and, and the way we sort of play out, the way we sort of work with people and work with teams. From a psychological perspective, this is just my experience. But definitely there is a very communal edge that women leaders bring to the table. What I will not fault men on is that they are very goal oriented, and that goal is very infrastructure. It's very infrastructure based, whereas with the goal for women is not necessarily about the end goal for the project itself. That's very much the goal, but lots of goals arise around that are placed within the people, the team that is going to bring that goal to fruition. And not just the team, also the stakeholders outside the goal, right? So leadership, it's in various forms. Like, you know, my poison of choice is in teaching, and I do feel that I have taken on the leadership role in the education space. So it's not necessarily in business, but kind of your Forbes, you know, at the top of these business spaces. But I do feel that I do feel that there is something. Women are more interested in the goals within the people that they are leading and the people for whom they are leading. And then the ultimate goal of the project that they're taking on is not superior to the goal within the people, if that makes sense. Whereas men are about I've got a project, and what's the end goal for the project itself. It doesn't matter what happens within the team members. And it's not to necessarily put men down. It's just to say that we have different approaches. And I think that they're more targeted. Male leadership is very much targeted to what has been laid out. You know, if there's a scope, there's a project, there's a spec. What are we trying to achieve? The project and what we're trying to achieve within the project is what men are generally focused on. Whereas women are focused more on the people within the project, on top of what the project itself is supposed to achieve. And that makes it very comfortable to be within female leadership, I think. That has at least been my experience anyway.
Thank you for that, Victoria. It actually goes back to, you know, just what you said right there, that there's a sort of communal spirit when it comes to women leadership. There's a sense of, instead of being more like, you know, targets and deadlines, rather focusing on the aspect of coaching the team, or sort of inspiring the team, or ensuring that there's a team morale, that's you know, that's good, you know. So it's focusing on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's me then. I think I wouldn't take anything away from what Victoria said. I'm in full agreement, and I think also it would just overlap. But for me, I would say a woman leader I see a woman leader as a mother. And by saying that, I mean that they are nurturers in nature. So when a woman is leading, they tend to mother, you know, what they are intending to achieve. So it would also include making sure that everybody is in the right state of mind. Everybody is well within their position to achieve the end goal without leaving anybody behind. To say that we should all be aligned in one mindset, in one area, and know that whatever we are achieving, it's for us. It's we're in full agreement, and we do not while there can be conflict in between the achievement of the goal, we would, at the end of the project, we would all be one. So I think that's how I view women leaders.
I like that. It's not an individualistic approach, but more, as you were saying, we'll all be one. There's a community involved, that when I achieve something, we all achieve something. Nice. So thank you, ladies, for this. So statistically, as we move on to our next question, it's been made known that across sub-Saharan Africa, 2.5% of vice chancellors are women, and 5% of CEOs are women. So women make up about 43% of those who receive tertiary education, but only hold 28% of formal sector jobs. So with that being said, statistically, sub-Saharan Africa is progressing in concern with empowering women. However, women are still disproportionately represented in these formal sector jobs. So what could be the case, especially because 43% of women are receiving education, so there is some form of progression, but only 28% get formal sector jobs. So what is the case in this situation?
Well, I think for me, it would go back to thinking that they are definitely barriers of women in leadership, right? So it would basically be things like old stereotypes, just a thought that a man should have a better job than a woman. A woman is more should do more home or become a wife or do informal work or so I think that those are old stereotypes that men are better leaders than women. They play a huge role in that gap of having less women in leadership, even though they are educated and well within their means to take up on the roles. And I think as well, a few connections, women tend to shy away from making network opportunities than men. Men are get to be more aggressive when it comes to seeking networks and mentorships and sponsorships and just putting themselves out there. It tends to be more men than women. So I think also that should be a barrier that would lessen the opportunities for women, because I think more deals are made during networking opportunities than actually drawing up a formal application or looking for a job and such. So if maybe women could put themselves out there even more, then that barrier would surpass. And lastly, I would also tap into the lack of flexibility in terms of just the working opportunities and family. Like when women work, there's that imbalance between men and women, so when women get to they need to balance the two, because they still have to play a huge role back at home. I think also earlier I heard that once women are married, they take 7 more hours of work from men, and men lessen their work with 1 hour, meaning that once women are married, they become more family oriented, and plus the professional work that they do that should be rather exhausting, because they have to do a lot of household chores like cooking, cleaning, and just looking after their children. So I think that should be the 3 pointers that I would say they do kill the progression of empowering women and making sure there is a good representation of women within the formal sector jobs.
Thank you so much for that, Olato. And I like what you pointed out there, that women have an additional, work in terms of the household aspect, as well as having to balance the formal sector jobs. And you find that a lot of these employers would sort of be reluctant to even hire more women employees, because they know that, okay, this person's going to get pregnant, this person's going to, go off and get married and spend more time on the household aspect versus dedicating more of their hours on the work. So there's also this kind of reluctancy in hiring. But yeah, thank you so much for that.
I really do think that Olerato touched on an important point, and that's the barriers, right? The barriers to female leadership, particularly in the formal sector. Especially at the high levels, the very prestigious levels of CEO in the business space, and vice chancellor in the academic space. There's definitely barriers, and I think that it comes down to something as simple as this. It's a man's world, and it's a man's world because the men were in the sort of industrial sector first, which means they built it to suit them. And then women went into the industrial sector. They became part of the community, part of the economy, and they had to fit in with the man's world. They had to fit in with the man's rules. And so what happens is we have a structure that celebrates and rewards male qualities and the male form of leadership, right? or the male sort of behaviors in terms of leadership, whereas female leadership is not so much celebrated in sort of formal spaces. It's not so much celebrated, and the structures just don't work. They just don't work with female leadership qualities, right? So there's the barrier. There's the undeniable barriers, and there's the barriers that we cannot sort of ignore. But I think it is important to be honest with ourselves and to recognize that, we say employers, we say the structures, but we need to recognize that some employers are women and some structures are women. And like we've said, women have the responsibility to go and work in the home, but at the same time, we need to recognize that some of the statistics that we see reflect the choices of women, right? So, for example, if you look at, right now we've looked at the formal sector jobs. We've looked at what is sort of stereotypically prestigious areas, right? But if you look at the statistics in bricklaying, and I'm not saying that I have looked at those statistics. This is just something I heard in passing in other podcasts that I've listened to. But I mean, if you look at the statistics in bricklaying, I mean, women are also underrepresented in bricklaying. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's barriers to women laying brick. I'm sure there certainly is, but I'm also sure that women are just not choosing the bricklaying jobs, Women are not choosing to spend an 80-hour work week, to have an 80-hour work week. They're choosing instead to maintain a balanced 40-hour work week so that they can go and invest in their other areas of leadership, which, like Olerato said, is motherhood. That is a space of leadership. There is mentorship within sort of non-formal, non-professional areas, so we have mentorship groups. I honestly, I'm just trying to think back. I cannot for the life of me remember any sort of male mentorship spaces that don't specifically and intentionally lead to actual work benefits, if that makes sense. So it's not about sort of personal edification and like growth and expanding your mind for men. If it doesn't go into making headway and making steps in the business space, they won't do it, but women do. Women tend to do that. And I think that these statistics are reflective of that, So in one instance, we're seeing that yes, women are not celebrated. The structures are not catering to female leadership qualities, but at the same time, female leadership permeates through so much more than just sort of your ordinary prestigious, in quotes, and again, this is very much in quotes, your ordinary prestigious roles. It goes into less female leadership goes into less prestigious areas, again, in quotes. So that would be in teaching, in mothering, in friendship, in mentorship that doesn't feed into your immediate professional gain. And that's what I see. That's what I've sort of picked up. There's the two sides. There's the barriers, but there's also the choices that women are making. That is not necessarily a bad thing.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Victoria, especially because I like that you highlighted that we often focus on statistic for the white collar jobs, right? The very professional and prestigious jobs, whereas you find that there are other sort of statistics on blue collar jobs where you see, a lot of women in nursing or women in teaching and so forth. But oftentimes we like to highlight that, there's a lack of women in these particular jobs, in these white collar jobs. And that kind of just gets into, as you said, like there's a need to highlight the choice that women have. Yes, there are those barriers, but there's also that choice of perhaps I don't want to see myself in these particular jobs. Those kind of things.
May I jump in, Slee?
Yes,
In
yeah,
order to answer. Thank you.
please.
I'm just, from what Victoria just said, I was just thinking about what my mentor once told me. She said that as women, we don't protect each other like men protect each other. men will die for another man, but they will, like, for us, we can easily just exclude you onto something, like you can just cast you out if you feel like don't agree with you. Like in a job setup, you can find that you did something wrong probably, and the guy will be like, don't, it's not a big deal. But for us, people like, no, Zanita, you did this and it was wrong, and these are the repercussions for it. So I think it also goes back to why we don't find ourselves in high positions, because we're not going to support each other to get into those positions, because we don't have that men, I don't know what it is called. They just have this clique of some sort in the job setup, that you may think that they don't have a problem with any other guy, but they do. It's just that they don't show it. They always cover for the next guy. I don't know what it is called, but it's just there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It's like boy code. What is it? Guy code, where they're able to like defend each other or be there or dependent
Yeah,
for.
it's a
Yeah,
fraternity. It's a brotherhood.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know if I was getting that right, Gunilo, the whole guy code or brotherhood.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I had a thought about what Victoria was saying in terms of the previous question. I don't know if that's still relevant.
Yeah, no,
Because I was
definitely.
thinking, like, I mean, total agreement is in terms of personal choices, but I'm thinking that aren't those personal choices influenced by those barriers that we have? I mean, if I would resist doing bricklaying as a woman, isn't it maybe because of those stereotypes that women don't do a certain job? So I'm not in the comfort of doing that because of how it has been from years and years of saying that women can drive trucks or whatever, or just the bias or the discrimination part of it or whatever. So I'm just thinking that while it's a personal choice, I think it's directly linked to the barriers that we have, that the barriers are the ones that are provoking our state of mind and how we see things as in individual sense, and also just to also touch on what Gunila was saying about women not supporting each other. I think that's the worst killer of all, because I think women tend to become more competitive with each other in working environment spaces than trying to prove themselves, trying to prove that they're better than the other, So I think is the thing that even happens within friendships and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the worst killers when it comes to women empowering another woman. So I think I just wanted to have a scent on that.
I absolutely agree that there's definite barriers. I absolutely think so. But I do think that there are two separate instances. So in one instance, there are barriers. Absolutely. It's a man's world. That much is true, I was thinking, and I mean, I don't know how sort of sexist and stereotypical this might be, but I mean, if women were to have created the work week, potentially we wouldn't have just sort of standard work weeks, This might be a little bit TMI, but there was a time I was sitting in a meeting, and I was on my period. I was on my period, and I was in so much pain, and I was extremely nauseous. But I sat there and I was professional, and I was using all of my strength and my power to answer the questions and to engage with my colleagues. And I was thinking to myself that if it had been if it had been men who had been feeling those things when they were inventing and creating the work weeks, I feel like they would have it would have been seen as an illness, as a genuine illness that you don't have to power through, but that you can take some time off for. And I mean we have different experiences as women when we go through these things. But I mean, I feel like there would be recognition that, you know what, this is actually something incredibly serious. My friend and I were joking about how a meeting between two men would go, and it would be something along the lines of, oh, hey, Jeff, are you ready to join in the meeting? No, Tepo, we can't actually start. Stan is on his period today, so we're gonna have to postpone to tomorrow. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Should we maybe not postpone for 2 days? Yeah, I think it's serious. I think we should maybe have it next week. Let's just, we felt like it would go that way because it would be so natural to recognize that this is actually a serious thing and no one should have to focus and concentrate through it. So several of us have to take drugs for this kind of thing to deal with it, but because it's a man's world, we sort of buckle down and deal, or we don't show up and the conversation is, oh well, she had to deal with her women stuff. You know how women are. We have to, she's raising her kids, she's doing whatever. That's the way it is. So there's definitely barriers in that sense, but I don't think that we can always say that the barriers are the reason women make the choices they make, because always. So a lot of the times they are, but I don't think that they're always that. I don't think it's always that case. And the reason I say that is because of my own personal choices, for example. So I do not have kids. I do not intend to have kids anytime in the near future anyway. And I do not want to work 80 hours a week. I just don't. I want to come home. I want to nurture my relationships with my friends. I want to nurture my relationships with my family, with children. It's just what I want to do. I'm not just about that grind. And I think this goes to what we were speaking about earlier, where we say female leadership is more comprehensive. It's not just about the bottom line. It's not just about making the decisions at the end of the day for the project within the professional space. It's about putting down the professional space for a moment and going to make leadership decisions within the home, going to make leadership decisions within the home where the roommates are, the home it's not just in home spaces, and I think that female leaders are more comprehensive in that way. And I don't think that always comes from, a barrier. So that's kind of what's on my mind in that instance. I think that there is some research that can be done into it as well. So apparently, I think it's like the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, things like that, places like that, where apparently there is they've somehow eradicated barriers. I don't know how they've done it, but in those instances, you still found that women just steered away from STEM careers, for example. They just sort of preferred more artistic things, there seems to be a choice that women make that men don't often tend to make, that is outside of the barriers, but the barriers definitely cannot be ignored. And I think that's worth thinking about, at least.
Yes, thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you for that, for just raising that, Olarato, because that is such an important aspect to consider, that those kind of barriers could essentially influence the choice that we make, whether our choice is actually from us or based on the sort of traditional norms and barriers that were once there. And I like what you pointed out, Victoria, that in a particular situation, there is an aspect of choice, especially in for certain women, that, like what you pointed out with the Scandinavian country, where they might prefer creative arts versus bricklaying or other aspects. So thank you so much for those points, ladies. So I just wanted to move on to the last question on how can Africa encourage a safe space for more women leaders? So how can we sort of cultivate that safe space?
Okay, so here I'd like to fully 100% back Tlinile and Olerato. If we live in a man's world, then there's barriers. We're going to have to struggle, and we're going to have to follow the men's rules to make it in the man's world, which is inherently opposite to who we are, right? And again, this is not to box anyone or to pigeonhole anyone. Women are unique. Each woman is unique. Each man is unique, and there are outliers. But we must also recognize that there are things that make us women, and there are things that make us men. And in a world in a world that is a man's world, women are going to struggle. But what that means then is it's up to us as women to stand together and create a woman's world. We need to do that. And like Trinile said, we can't do that if we're at each other's throats. We can't do that. But at the same time, you know, if you're in a man's world, and so let's say there are 100 men, and that's literally the statistic here, right? So if it's 2.5%, I think 5% of CEOs, right? That literally means that in 100 men, in 100 people, five people are women and 95 people are men, right? And in that setting, in a man's world, what is a girl to do? You know, she needs to, especially when it's about choosing between me and her, I'm going to choose me. But what happens is, if we do want to see leadership, if we want to see female leadership, we have to be prepared to put down, and it's something we need to we need to introspect, you know, and look into ourselves and say, how much does female leadership really mean to me? Because if it really means enough, then we need to be prepared to put down the me before her mentality and say, you know what, if there's 5 women amongst 95 men, then we need to not split our vote as the 5 women. We need to not vote for 5 different women, because that means 1 woman gets 1 vote. We need to stand together and say, guys, out of the 5 of us, who is the best qualified? All 5 of us need to vote for her. We need to put ourselves. We need to put the other woman in front of us. And that's going to require some introspection. That's going to require us saying, you know what, somebody else needs to be at the forefront and not me.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely in total agreement with that. We definitely do need to support each other a little bit more, 100%. And my thoughts as well is that we need to also embrace our natural leadership styles, just to know that nurturing side of us is embedded within us, and how we would reflect, like how we nurture like our immediate families, our friendships, and what we are fond of. It shows, it reflects in how you'd even grow a business or become a leader in a formal setting, So I think if we can embrace those natural leadership styles that are embedded within us as women, to know that we want nothing but the best, and we want a where everybody feels in a situation where everybody feels involved and are part of a goal, and nobody feeling like they're left behind. I think that's one of the things that if we do groom and accept that we have it in us, it would actually take us far and make us better leaders than men. And I think also just taking a chance in putting ourselves up for positions that would probably seem like they are more for men, or a man would be more qualified than a woman. So I think just putting ourselves up for those challenges, to put in applications and stand in and say, I'm taking a chance, I think it's a step forward. When you fail once, the next time you know how it feels, and it's an opportunity to take up better positions in those areas. So I think those are my 2 cents in regards to that.
And
Wow.
may I add something on that?
Yes.
Thank you. So I was just thinking about how men are not patient to stick around to something that's not like beneficial to them. As women, we're very patient even in like tricky situations. And I always thought that was like a bad thing. But then now that I think about it, I think it's just one of our strengths, our nature inside. It comes natural for us to be patient and it's a good thing because we make the world a better place. And I just want to say that I remember one time I had to resign from, a governance position because of how I was treated because of my age and also because I'm a woman. And as I was writing my resignation letter, I thought I'd let everyone down. Like people were like really excited for me, and it's a good position and what's not. But I thought I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I didn't get to this space because I'm a woman or I'm a young person. I got to the space because of what I put on the table, what I added on the table. And as we young women try to make it to those spaces, I just want us to remember that we should understand that, when you get to sit at the table, you should create a better table for the next generation. Change the conversations and ensure that everyone finds it better. It's either you leave or you stick around, but either way, you have to find a way to make it better so that the next woman who gets to sit on the table finds a better table. And on top of that, we need to take ownership. We don't get to just sit there, but you being there means that you have to deliver. And that's like one of the most important things, because most oftentimes you ask yourself, am I here because they're trying to, box tick, or am I here because people really respect my work? So I think even though it does put so much pressure onto us, but either way, we have to deliver so that no one gets to, question your skills and whatsoever. But more than anything, we just have to keep on improving our skills. Don't settle for anything. Don't settle because you are whatsoever. You keep on working hard and becoming better than you were when you started whatsoever thing. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Quinila. I think just to add on that, I think one of the things that I also realized is that respect is earned, particularly when you are either a young person or a woman in a working environment. It doesn't matter if you are your own boss, you are an entrepreneur, or you are in a managerial position. It takes time for people to give you respect. I mean, when I started my business, I found I found people who were already there because I was taking the business from another person. And for the team to respect me, it took a lot of major decisions for me to take, for me to earn respect, such as firing, such as putting systems into place, and for the system to take time to take off and such things. And I realized that you don't just come in and say, I have a position and everybody would just definitely respect me because this is my position. No, you have to earn it, even if it's yours. The same happened to the next business that I went into. I still had to earn some respect, but the business was still mine. And that's one of the differences that is there. And I mean, it goes to say, with even when people are presidents or whatever, they still have to earn the respect that they want to get out of the citizens. So I think that's one thing that I have learned, that it doesn't matter if you are a young person or woman or whatever, but you definitely have to earn respect in terms of the skills and the position that you hold.
Wow, ladies, the discussion is so engaging. Like, just everything that you saying right now, it's so helpful, especially when we're trying to encourage more women leaders, and we want to be able to motivate women to not only be in those positions, but to be respected in those positions, and also so that we're not, in each other's throats, but actually supporting one another. So I really love that. So thank you so much for this discussion, ladies. Any last remarks or points before we end off?
I don't know if we can go just a little bit over time. There was an extra point that I wanted to add, because the question was, How can Africa encourage a space for more women leaders?
Mm,
And just in my thinking, there was sort of a spanner maybe that I might throw in the works. Again, like, you know, I said we need to reflect as women and ask ourselves if we're prepared to say, you know what, if I want to see more women in leadership, then I must be prepared to potentially step down and let another woman take a leadership position that I could potentially fill. You know, we must be prepared to do that in support of one another. So that's introspection that we as women would need to do. But I think in Africa, we might need to introspect on our values as well, especially if we're calling ourselves transformative, which is literally what the word means. Interestingly, one of our African values is that of Ubuntu, right? And that means the community. That's about us together, not me by myself. It's not individualistic. And by that standard, female leaders should be soaring through the roof, right? Because we are more community centered than men generally tend to be. And so I think we need to kind of like have more. We need to raise that more in conversations where we're talking about who the best leader is, you know, around the table where we're discussing, okay, who's the best person for this position. We should say, based on what we claim we hold valuable, the best leader is the one that is most comprehensive, is the one that takes care of the community, not the one that has a single goal in mind. You know, so are we holding true to that? We need to hold true to that. And the other thing, and I think this one is the introspection that Africa as a whole needs to do, both men and women, is this sort of old gender role of, well, it's the man that's the leader, you know? Do we as Africa accept that women can even be leaders? And if we do, what do we do with that value, or that, I don't even know if it's a value. What do we do with that sort of mindset where we say, but the man is the leader, the man is the head? What do we do with that? What do we mean by that? And what does that mean for leadership outside of the home? What does that mean for leadership within the business? You know, I think that there's just some introspection that we need to do, and we need to have more conversations like this. Because there's some thinking we need to do so that we get the principles right before we get the practical right, before we get the numbers right, so that it's 50-50.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victoria, for that point that you stated there. And yeah, ladies, I am so happy just with everything that we discussed, and thank you to our listeners for joining us today. So we hope the discussion was engaging and thought-provoking. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Be on the lookout for our next episode in our leadership series, Leadership in Business. Bye, everyone.